warriors gathered around the crackling hearth, raising their horns of mead to a man garnished with glittering gold. A heart-bearing skald had just finished reciting a poem about his exploits against a neighboring king, singing how he had fought valiantly and claimed victory with Odin's blessing. Then the warlord rose from his high seat, silencing the hall with a wave of his ring-adorned hand. Speaking to his oath-bound followers, he proclaimed thereupon the feast that he wanted to seek even greater fortunes abroad, not in Phrygia, but beyond the sea in a land called England. Didn't they deserve to have a more lavish feast than this? Hadn't they earned the right to claim even greater gifts for themselves and from their lord? The warriors responded to his reasoning well, and it was soon decided that their ships would sail to that land when summer came. In this way, the Viking Age began in the halls of their chieftains, those who reshaped the landscape of Scandinavia from the ashes of its past trauma. Having laid the groundwork in centuries prior, the chieftains of the north and their contenders increasingly set their sights on more ambitious raids from the 750s onward. This trend kick-started in their halls, but gradually and dramatically escalated over the course of the next 3 centuries until about 1050, culminating in organized military campaigns bent on conquering foreign kingdoms. While those Vikingar ravaged Europe, however, their fellow Norse also pushed the limits of their trade, settlements, and exploration even further abroad. They traded in Baghdad, settled down in Ireland, and were the first Europeans to explore and possibly give birth to a child in North America. Therefore, although the Viking Age is typically characterized by Vikingar going i Viking, it was also a time of profound social transformation as the Norse interacted more directly with different cultures in a variety of ways. Nevertheless, violent events still tend to define the Viking Age, so you might see that the Viking Age lasted from 793 to 1066, rather than 750 to 1050. This is because the Viking Age is often bookended by 2 events, the raid on Lindisfarne in 793 and Harold Hardradi's defeat at Stamford Bridge in 1066. Both date ranges have their fair share of debates and exceptions accompanying them, so choose whichever is the easiest for you to remember. Since this section is titled Kickstarting the Viking Age, however, I'll go ahead and explain why that raid on Lindisfarne is considered so important. It was the quintessential Viking raid, a classic and quite famous example of what probably comes to mind when you think of one. If you're imagining Vikings storming the beach of a peaceful monastery, murdering monks and carrying away treasure, then you've already got a good idea of what their raid on Lindisfarne was probably like. Yet, the fame of this raid for historians lies in the reaction their victims had to its ruin. Lindisfarne was considered one of the holiest places in the British Isles, and the outcry following its ruin was a notably loud acknowledgement of the Vikingar. When news traveled that, quote, the miserable raiding of the heathens destroyed God's church on the Isle of Lindisfarne through plundering and murder, end quote, a shockwave of fear swept through the minds of contemporaries. How could such a holy place fall prey to pagans? How could God and his saints have allowed such a thing? A man named Alcuin, a churchman and scholar, famously argued that they had brought the wrath of God upon themselves, and that the arrival of the Vikings was therefore divine judgment for their sins. Behold, judgment has begun, with great terror at the house of God, in which rest such lights of the whole of Britain. What should be expected for other places, when the divine judgment has not spared this holy place? I do not think this sin is theirs alone who dwell in that place. Would that their correction would be the amendment of others, and that many would fear what a few have suffered, and each say in his heart, groaning and trembling, if such great men and fathers so holy did not defend their habitation and the place of their repose, who will defend mine? Defend your country by assiduous prayers to God, by acts of justice and mercy to men. Let your use of clothes and food be moderate. Nothing defends a country better than the equity and godliness of princes and the intercessions of the servants of God. Even so, Lindisfarne wasn't actually the first victim of the Vikingar. Ships from a burial at Salme in Estonia, for example, have been dated to around the year 750 through isotopic analysis. The bodies buried in those ships show signs of violent deaths, suggesting that Viking activity actually began half a century before the attack on Lindisfarne, in the east across the Baltic Sea, rather than west beyond the North Sea. The written record also indicates that Viking raids were taking place before Lindisfarne, even in England. This year, King Beorhtric of Wessex married Eadburh, Ulfa's daughter, and in his days there came, for the first time, 3 ships of Northmen from Hordaland in Norway. Then the Reeve rode to meet them. He intended to have them go to the king's town because he did not know what they were. They killed him. These were the first Danish ships to attack the land of the English people. If we're being England-centric, which I'd like to avoid, then the Viking Age actually began in 789. Yet, when looking for a mythical first raid that kickstarted the entire Viking Age, we run the risk of making things overly complicated for ourselves. First of all, Vikingar didn't hit every kingdom at the same time, nor did they act according to a unified purpose. And secondly, the North actually has a long history of raiding in foreign lands. According to Gregory of Tours' 6th century History of the Franks, a king of the Goltar named Hugelac, Beowulf's uncle, raided parts of Phrygia in 528 CE, over 200 years before any sort of Viking Age. But even then, a ship filled with weapons was once given as a votive offering, it seems, at Hjortspring around 350 BCE, suggesting that seaborne raiding and warfare was already commonplace in the North long ago. So, what actually made a raid Viking?